Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Introduction to Scouting and Intel. I am Archemorus Abyss, teacher, mentor manager, assistant manager, WHC resident, all of scouting. So, this class will be a general overview of scouting, intel gathering, intel reporting, and just general information there. We'll cover a broad range of topics. Some topics have their own specific classes, so I won't delve too deep into those. But I will answer as many questions as I can. If you do have a question, please preface it with a Q and lecture. I will try to answer as much as I can in the allotted time that we have. And I'm hoping that the end of the class will be a large just Q&A. So, what is scouting? There's a couple ways to scout for fleets and such. The basic one is just roaming. A roaming scout just follows intel that they receive based off of external resources, in-game resources, what they know. Then there's the fleet. There's a +1, +2 kind of fleet scout. These scouts follow the designated path set by the FC. They tend to fly ahead, provide a quick, just provide an early warning system for the fleet. They also are a way of getting fights, because no one wants to fight the 100-man fleet that is following the +1 scout, but that +1 scout can either secure a fight or just gather intel. No one wants to jump into a 200-man gate camp and such like that. And then there's a different type of fleet type of scout like that. There's the -1 or -2 that you might hear. These are more of a security measure. Am I being followed? Is the fleet being followed? Stuff like that. To know, do we have to be worried about being trailed? And then the last type of fleet scout is bait and skirmish. Baiting is just simply that you're trying to secure a fight against probably a force that's either less than your force or just in general. The bait idea is to send in a small fleet that looks like it's your normal fleet and have the enemy fleet engage that. You can also do that with war targets and anyone. It's all about securing a fight before you bring in the rest of your fleet. Some tricks to these bait ships are they're either really heavily tanked or they can survive just long enough. That's the key. And then skirmishers. Skirmishers are very unique. They're mostly used in larger fleets because in smaller fleets you want any able body. But larger fleets, they have skirmishers, typically flown by interceptor pilots. They tend to go around the path that the main fleet is following, but because they can move so fast, they can go to different systems that are a little bit off the route that the fleet's taking, but they're there to fight fights. They tend to just go on their own, follow their own intel. They're kind of like a roaming scout, but they do follow the main fleet's path. So, now onto ships. There's a couple types of ships that are generally used for scouting. Any ship can be used for scouting, but there's some key ships that are great for it. So, the new bro-friendly ship is the Tech 1 Tackle Frigate. These are the Slasher, the Condor, the Atron, and the Executioner. Any other Tech 1 frigate can also be a tackle frigate, but these ships tend to be designed for it a bit more than the other ones. They're fast, they're easy to skill into. There's not much craziness involved with them, aside from they do explode pretty quickly, unfortunately, but they're imperative in most fleets. You can never have enough tackle. There are other forms of Tech 1 tackle, just tankier ships that can hold on to other ships a bit longer, like just an example, Merlin is one of them. They can be fit to have a stronger tank, but generally are not used as fleet scouts, fleet tackle, just because they're a bit slower. So, Tech 2 tackle. These are interceptors. There's two types of interceptors. There's the Fleet Interceptor, which is the Malediction, Crow, Ares, and Stiletto. These are, like, hands down some of the best tackle you can get. They're fast. The ship hull is bonus towards a long point range. Yes, go ahead, Rena. Point range, which means you can tackle a lot farther and make sure something stays tackled. They're also bonus towards micro warp drive signature radiuses. So when you have your MWD running, it's harder to be hit than a normal frigate. Most fleet scouts are fleet interceptors. And then there's a different type of interceptor called a combat interceptor. You don't see these too often as fleet tackle. They're more used in a skirmisher solo type basis. These are the Crusader, Raptor, Tyrannus, and Claw. From what I have seen, the only combat interceptor really used is the Tyrannus. I'm not the expert on these interceptors, but they're still fast. They can still tackle. They're not bonus towards tackle range, but they're quite good at one-on-one or shooting fleet interceptors. Another thing that makes interceptors great for quick movements is their interdiction nullified, which means they can just fly through bubbles. They ignore them. You can warp gate to gate and null and not have to worry about any bubbles holding you up. But there is one downside is you can't actually bait land in a bubble. But you can always warp to a bubble because as the mod item itself. Another type of ship, which is some of the best scouting ships you can get, is the covert ops scanning frigates. Each one of these, it's the Buzzard, the Cheetah, the Helios, and the Anathema. Why these are so good is they can warp while cloaked. Let me clarify something. Most fleet interceptors, the guns are there for either looks, pretty much. You're not there to actually shoot target, you're just there to hold it. So the covert op ships can warp while cloaked, which can provide valuable intel without actually showing what you're in. They can also move around on grid with the enemy fleet, try to provide warp sends. They're also bonus towards scouting, which can be used, scanning, which can be used to combat probe down other ships, which is also a whole other aspect of the game. But it's always good to have combat probers in case of sniping ships, or if you want to strategically land on a certain group of ships in a fleet fight, say the logistics portion. One moment. So, there's another type of covert ship. That's a stealth bomber. There's only one application for these, really, and it is to get a cloaky insta-lock, quick lock ship. Most ships that are covert ops have a relock delay. The stealth bombers, which are the Purifier, Manticore, Hound, and Nemesis, do not have a relocking delay, which means they can start their lock instantly from uncloaking, which means it's less likely for the enemy ship to actually warp away. But that is about the only practical application for fleet scouting with bombers, aside from the fact that they can warp around cloaked and look at other people. So, last group of ships is the Recon T3, cruiser-size hulls. Recons are mostly there as fleet support ships. They can warp while cloaked, but they're slow. They have generally bad cap, so they can't actually do the very long warps efficiently. But they can warp while cloaked, which is also a plus. So each one of these is the Pilgrim, the Falcon, Arazu, and Rapier. Each one of these has its very strongly bonus towards a certain type of E-War. But that's about all they're really good for, as very strong E-War ships, which can decloak and cloak. So the enemy doesn't know they're there until it's too late, for the most part. And the last ship is the T3. Quite expensive, you lose skill points if you lose it, but they are worth the risk if you are flying it in a fleet that is supporting it. They can be interdiction nullified, they can also be covert fit, they can also be scanning fit, which means they're very good at what they do. They're a bit slower than either the frigate hulls that are bonus towards each one of those, but they're great at heavy tackle. They're also very good at wormhole scanning, just because they can actually fight. So, the four ships are the Loki, the Legion, the Tengu, and the Proteus. Some quick notes: the Loki's great because it can do long-range webs. It can hold down a target. A Legion can be fit with newts. A Tengu is probably generally considered the weakest Cloaky T3, but it can tackle. And you can fit an enormous tank on it, and it can tackle. And then the Proteus is by far considered the best. Cloaky T3 can do amazing damage. It can point long off. And yes, any object within 2,500 meters will decloak you, but if you can have 1,000 ships cloaked up on top of each other, and as long as they're all cloaked, none of them will decloak. But until something that is uncloaked comes within 2,500 meters, everything will decloak. Is there any questions so far about ships and types of scouts? Okay. So on to something of more of an intel gathering method. Maps and bookmarks. So you have your autopilot. For the most part, or actually almost all the time, you will not actually use your autopilot to actually travel. You'll use it as a navigational tool. You can set destinations, set waypoints. It makes it so it's quite easy to remember where you want to go. You could also use it as to find the quickest high sec out of where you are. To do that, you just set your autopilot to prefer safer, and it will find the quickest route to high sec. You can also ignore certain systems like JITA, for example, if you don't want to ever go there, stuff like that. But for the most part, and what you should do is just use autopilot as a navigational tool and not as a lazy travel tool. The in-game map has some benefits. Generally, you want to use an out-of-game tool like Dotlan, but the in-game map can give you more reliable information, like where are Cynosaur fields active, what's happening in the system right now. It's not 100% like instant information. There is a delay. I think it's 15 minutes, but it is quicker than Dotlan, as in providing that type of intel. So one of the best out-of-game tools, like I said, is Dotlan. You can do a lot with Dotlan. You can have it track your route, so you can watch where you're going, what it looks like. It also provides a better-looking map than an in-game map browser. You can also plan routes with it, probably better than you can in-game. You can provide jump planning for your capitals. And you can also do range finding, which means you can figure out how far your Black Ops battleship can bridge your Black Ops fleet if you're doing Black Ops hot drops. And it is generally a great idea if you have two screens to have Dotlan running on a second screen. There is ways to, or there is a feature called Radar which lets you track in-game, but it pulls the intel or the information to your to the out-of-game browser. So bookmarks. There's a couple types of bookmarks that I'll go over. I think Core did or is doing a bookmarking class, but there's instant undocks. Instant undocks are just bookmarks that let you warp away from the undock of a station instantly, so you can't be targeted, you can't be shot, can't be tackled, which lets you be safe. And so you can go warp off somewhere else. You make these by either just doing a straight burn out from a station until you're greater than 150 km away. Midpoint safes, these are generally considered there's multiple names for it. Essentially, these are the quick saves, the not so good saves. You make these when you're in warp to a different celestial. You can either do this when you're building saves in a system, or if you're going into a fleet fight and you know you need to bounce, you can make a mid-save as you're getting close to landing, but off-grid, which means you'll have to warp less distance to get to it. You'll be off-grid. You'll be quite safe. Gate observation posts are tacticals. These are heavily used in nullsec and can be used in highsec. They're a bookmark that is greater than 150 km away from a gate, but not in line with any celestial that you could warp to. These are mostly used to either get eyes on a gate to see what's there so you can warp to the gate, or they're used to make a bounce point so you don't get caught in bubbles in nullsec. You make these by simply just burning greater than 150 km away from the gate, but not towards like another gate, just in the midst to a random direction in space. And then the last one is deep saves, or just better saves. What you do with those is you make a midpoint save, and then you work to different celestial or different midpoint save, and you make a bookmark in between those. And that's not in line with anything, hopefully, and it's one of the better saves you can have. Like I said, I think core is either doing a class or did a class of bookmarking. I highly suggest you go on that if it's still coming up.
It's coming up at 2200.
Is there any questions so far? I'm kind of talking really fast, I think. Okay. Vigor asks, rolling save. A rolling save is created by a fast ship burning really fast in one direction. These are used if you are just trying to make a quick save for your fleet. An interceptor can burn 150 km quite quickly, so you just keep warping to the interceptor as soon as you can get warped to it, like as it's far enough to be in warp range. And a bookmark is actually done when you hit the submit button. So, onto intel gathering. So there's a couple ways to gather your intel. The generic one is the overview. Assuming you have the overview set up, and hopefully you all should, as per uni standards, it is the most reliable intel you can ever get. Because you're on grid with the ships. You can see their positions, you can see their velocities, you can see the corp, alliance, who the people are, and all that information. But it's always assuming you have it all set up right. There's a whole guide on the wiki that can tell you how to set it up right, but in general, the overview is the best information you're going to get. And you can either get that by warping to the gate or wherever the fleet is. You can do it uncloaked or cloaked, depending on which ship you are. One will be safer or one will be less revealing to the enemy. So the next one is local. Local tells you who is around. This can be quite good if, say, you see 200 people in local and it's 200 Pandemic Legion. You might want to be a little bit more careful than if it's 200. I can't think of someone, but not Pandemic Legion, or just some smaller entity that flies around and say frigates when you are in a bunch of cruisers. It's about who you're fighting. And numbers, of course. Local is also good for knowing, say, there's 100 people on grid with me, but there's 300 people in local. Well, there's 200 unaccounted for people. And directional scan or D-scan. This is based off of what your overview settings are, so if you have ships appearing on it, ships are on your overview, ships will appear in your D-scan. This is great for finding positions of enemy fleets, but it's not good for telling who it is. But you can definitely tell, oh, there's 300 Talos at X gate. You might want to take a little bit more precautions if you warp into that. And there's a little trick. Use active overview settings will give you, if you uncheck that, you'll have all the information like unfiltered. You'll almost have probably too much at that point, but it's great for knowing everything. So some out-of-corp tools. There's D-scan analyzers. There's a dashboard, which we're going to link. It's good for local. You can parse local with that, or you can also parse a D-scan. Dingo is my favorite for just a strictly directional scan parser. Each have their benefits. Dashboards, I think that's the only one that parses local that I know of. A couple that of those two. But Dingo gives you a good visual representation of what's happening in DScan. So there's some wormhole. One second, lost my sheet. Wormhole mapping tools. A lot of these tend to be more private for like mapping out your chains. If you live in wormhole space, you'll know that you'll never have a static connection. Well, a static connection to a static system. You have a static type of connection that goes to a certain type of system, but it'll never be the same system every 24 hours. So I won't get into the mapping tool, but so there's a wormhole system analyzer called Wormhole ES. This is great for even if you don't live in WSpace, but you do venture into it, you can see what the residents are like, who they are, have they been evicted recently, what they like to use, what time they're active at. And kill boards. So a guy, if you're out faction warfaring, and one guy comes to system, appears to be someone who will shoot you. You can quickly look up on their kill board what they'd like to fly and what they actually can kill. It's another way of finding out information about a corp or a person or alliance. A couple of kill boards are Eve Kill and Zed Kill board. I think Zed Kill board's doing an update, so it won't have all the information that Eve Kill had, but I think they're trying to make Zed Kill board into the primary one. And last one is image capturing tools. These are great for taking a picture of your screen and showing other people what's actually happening if you can't quite explain it. So a couple of those are ShareX and Giazzo. And one second. And that one, which I've recently been told is also one that also can transfer images to Imgur. I personally suggest you use ShareX instead of Giazzo just because Giazzo does not work so well in the in-game browser. Any questions so far? So the next section is communication. This is very important to be able to express what's happening, where it's happening, who's happening. So some things to remember when some things to remember when you're reporting intel. Always be calm. If you jump through a gate, you have 60 seconds to relay information to the FC. So some things I like to remember are, who is my FC? Does my FC want to know everything, or does he just want to know important information? If you don't, this really only works if you fly with a certain FC multiple times or regularly. But it's good to have a general routine on what you provide to a certain FC. If they want more, they'll tell you. If they don't want less, they'll also tell you. But it's always good to know who you're flying with. The more important one is, what is my fleet? So say you have 250 beam APOCs, and a Tech 1 frigate gang is coming through the gate. You don't have to go ballistic over the Tech 1 frigate gang that's coming through, because unless the APOCs are all sensor boosted fit, they're not going to be able to do anything to those frigates. And more than likely, the frigates won't even touch the APOCs, or the battleship fleet in this case. So it's good to let your FC know, but it's not important to do a whole break for the giant, like the 10-man fleet that's coming through. It's really important to know your fleet and know what you can actually catch. Shuttles, pods, interceptors are quite difficult to catch and hold down. So, another thing is important information. So, who is the enemy? Like, what alliance are they from? Are they brave newbies? Are they Center Advanced Studies? Are they Pandemic Legion? Goons? It's also very important to relay that information to your FC, because it also tells you, will they drop on me, or are they prone to having 2,000 people? Is there like a celebrity, like a big Goon FC, or a PLFC? And this can be used to say headshot, or to take out their primary FCs to help win the fight if you plan on doing that. I won't get into the whole morals based off of that or wanting good fights, but knowing important people, like primary FCs for big alliances, is quite important. The fleet composition, like, is it 20 frigates, or 20 cruisers, or 20 T3s? Very big differences. Knowing or telling their FC that quickly is quite important. And of course, numbers. If I say 5 frigates, I hope I'm jumping into 5 frigates, or if I hear 5 frigates. Instead, if I jump into 100 frigates, that's bad until you want to express what's happening, like what's on grid, what's on D-scan, what's local, like, but you want to be quick and concise. And then key ships. Do they have a bunch of capitals? Or is there actually capitals on grid? Tech 3s? Other expensive ships like pirate battle cruisers? Or certain types of ships like Black Ops? All quite important key ships. I mean, T2 hacking, like heavy assault cruisers, they may not, they're not as important to relate information as opposed to a Tech 3 gang, which more than likely will have extra support. And then the last one is, where is the fleet? Is the fleet at 0 on the gate? Is the fleet at range of the gate? Is the Logi 50 off and the rest of the fleet is at 0? It's all important information to relay quickly and concisely. So, mumble. You need to have voice communication if you're going to be a scout. The FC does not want to be waiting the 10 seconds for you to type out what's happening, just because it stresses out the FC itself, and it's 10 seconds later than what it could be. At range is what we say, like, say you warp to a gate at 50. You are at range from the gate by 50 km. It just means you are away from a certain celestial or object. So, chat channels is always used for these. Say you don't want to clutter mumble with sign walls or jump routes or just other information. People have channels with all sorts of stuff. It's mostly used to not clutter a fleet. You can have a squad channel, a wing channel. It's also used for operational security. Like, you don't want the bulk of the fleet knowing where you're staging sinos or you're staging your capitals and stuff like that. So you want to keep that restricted to the people who just need to know it. Chat channels is also good for the scouts. You have a specific channel for scouts telling the FC what's happening. This can be a channel and also could be a specific mumble channel like the command channel. Any other questions? So, the next section is tactical maneuvers. There's a couple of them. I won't get too in depth just because there's whole classes based off of them. So, probing. Probing can be used for a whole bunch of things. Finding someone in a mission pocket, or finding the logi that's specific, that is a certain distance off of the rest of the fleet. You can probe down these ships and land right on top of them, which can be quite useful if you don't want to have to burn or fly through the enemy damage dealing portion of the fleet, but you can land right on top of their logistics portion. There's a couple tricks. If you're trying to find someone who is watching D-scan, it's harder to probe them down just because probes will appear on D-scan. There's whole tricks, there's a whole class based off of hiding probes and trying to probe down it. But the best probers can probe down an enemy ship with one probe scan, which is quite difficult. It takes practice, and it's not the easiest thing to do. Punting. So you scan down a ship. You can punt the enemy fleet by doing a squad warp, and you warp the squad to the enemy ship. You don't warp yourself because odds are you are in a covert ops scanning ship, which has little to no combat capability. One thing to remember about punting is the squad, wing, or fleet warps at the speed of the slowest ship. So if you want to just do a fleet interceptor punt, take out all the battleships from that squad and just punt the interceptors. It'll be quite quick since the cov-ops warps at the same speed as interceptors. And the last one is warp-ins. So you're already on grid in a covert ops ship. What you can do is you can get into a position where the rest of your fleet warps to you at 0 specific range based on where they are. This is another way of just getting tactical advantage over the enemy. You warped in a covert ops ship to the POS, and most of the enemy DD is really close to the POS shield. But the enemy logi is 30 off of the enemy DD. You can do a warp in to the enemy logi with your fleet and hopefully destroy as much logistics before the enemy DD has a chance to react. So that kind of wraps up most of what I was going to say. Please hope there's some more questions, otherwise this is a very short class. So shoot your questions. I'll probably go to the ones that were on the forum post in a moment. DD, damage dealing ships. Most ships are classified as damage dealing. They just shoot the enemy. So, Cardo asks, is it recommended if it's some kind of tackle to your ship for those just-in-case moments, or is it that out of the question for a scout? So, interceptors of course fit tackle. Most covert ops can fit tackle themselves. I personally have a couple fits with tackle and without. It's all about what you want to do, what you want to risk. Hero tackling is definitely something that does happen. Nadir asks, I've been told that you can warp in under 2 seconds. You cannot be caught. Essentially, from what I have been told, it has to deal with server ticks. Server, I think, ticks every second, so it is possible to be warp fast enough or get into warp fast enough. It's nigh impossible to get caught. Indus asks regarding punting, how can you warp others but not yourself? You control space. The best way to do this is just not be moving, and you control space as soon as you do the squad warp, which will stop your ship. Viger asks, can you explain the use of out-of-corp scouts or pickets? So, this is a quite good one. So, in war, anyone in the E-UNI or in your corp can be shot by the enemy war targets. Out-of-corp is you have someone who's just not in your corp. Put them in either a personal corp that's small, or you put them in, the best ones are just the NPC corps. They can't be war decked. They'll have to either suicide gank you actually to destroy you, but you use them as eyes for yourself, where you don't have to risk your own ship to the war targets themselves, and they may not know you're out of core bolts. So it gives you a way of looking at the enemy, and they don't know you're actually looking at them. Unless you make it quite obvious, you leave a covert op ship watching the enemy on a gate for like 10 minutes. They're just ways of getting eyes, hopefully without telling the enemy that you're actually watching them. So, Alpha asks, can you walk us through what a scout should typically do when jumping to a system as a +1? So, you jump into a system as, say, you're in a Condor. The gate's clear, you say, and D-scan's clear. Well, you just say everything's clear with D-scan and the gate. If local is also clear, you just say the system is clear. So, what you want to do is check the gate grid you're already on. Am I in danger if I just decloak right away? Then you check local. Is there a large amount of people in local? And if you want, you can also check criminal status, like are they perma-flashy. You also want to check corpse or alliances. And then you can check D-scan. Is there a lot of ships on D-scan if there's a lot of ships and people in local? But the primary thing is check your grid, check local, check D-scan. Then report that information as quickly and concisely as possible. Okay. So Tyriandra asks, would a drone recon ship fitted with E-war drones be preferable for a fleet? So it all depends on what you're doing. I'm not too familiar with the Pilgrim. I don't know its drone bay. I fly a Falcon. I fit E-war drones on it. You can fit whatever drones you want. But for the most part, you're mostly there for your own personal cloak and the personal ship bonus hull, the hull bonus. So, Nadir asks, you mentioned various ships. Which one single ship would you recommend to aim for? It all depends. Do you like to be fast and tackle something uncloaked? Then aim for the Interceptor. Do you like to watch people while cloaked? Do stealth bomber and covert ops. You'll get those at the same time. I highly suggest you train for those before you go into the recons. The recons are quite a bit more expensive, but they're great at what they do. But they're all, like I said, a bit slower. Okay, so Flubber asks, even when you jump a gate, the covert ops cloak module keeps working as a question? No. All modules stop. You'll have a complementary cloak of 60 seconds if you jump through a gate, and 30 seconds if you jump through a wormhole. To be able to restart your cloak, you actually have to move from where you landed after you jumped. So you have to remove your own complementary cloak. So Alpha asks, can you outline the most common ways to look for fights in the system, where to go from the gate, how to look quickly, what to pay attention to? So I'm assuming you mean low sec. There are some ways in high sec, but for the most part, you're hopefully getting eyes beforehand and not trying to actually pick a fight, because most war targets will just run or hide. So, in low and no, you want to just check your D-scan. Where are the enemy ships? That's the biggest one. If you can find them quickly, you can usually tell based on what you D-scan. Like, is it a gate? Or is there just a station in there? And that cluster you D-scan down. You can also check faction warfare complexes. It's just all about D-scanning first. Being good at D-scan is quite important as a scout. So, you D-scan, there's nothing around you, but there are gates out of range of D-scan. What you can do is warp to a celestial nearby and then D-scan again. Unless you're feeling quite brave and you could just warp to the gate itself or the complex itself. For the most part, I found that I never had to make a save to actually scout out a system. While looking for fights, you just warp to a celestial and you just start moving. The best celestials are, say, customs offices and such like that. Don't warp to a moon. Odds are there's a pause there, and they could shoot you. So okay, Electric asks, how can we learn more about descanning, how to get good at it? So I think there's class, there's I think a syllabus about descanning 101 in the syllabus library. There's, hopefully someone will teach a class in the near future, but practice. It's just a lot about practice. Another quick little thing about descanning. By default, if you hit the F11 button, it'll bring up 4 maps on the right-hand side of your screen. The bottom map will actually show you the angle at which your descan is actually scanning. If you mess with the angle, it'll actually show you what celestials are where in the solar system you're actually descanning to. By default, it is F11. Karu asks, what do I do if there is a massive fleet report? Way too many to listen individually. What is the best way to report it? As an alliance, you want to report the corporate alliance, what the general ships are. Give a rough estimate of there's 20 Cerberus, or 5 Guardians and 10 Proteus, or if there's more than that, you just give a rough estimate. The best way to do it is also do a descan and give them the link through the descan parser tools. The last thing you want to do is go, oh god, there's ships on the enemy, on this gate. It gives no information aside from the location of the ships. So I'm going to go through a couple questions that were on the forums, hopefully give you guys some more time to think about more. So David on the forums asked a couple. This first one is, why Sisters probes / launcher? They are considerably more expensive, but just looking at the stats, they don't look to be that much more impressive. You fit a Sisters probe launcher on a ship that you don't plan to go into combat with, or is it a T3? They're dedicated scanning ships. Every little bit can help you. You almost always use Sisters combat probes or Sisters probes just because they're better than the standard ones and they're not overly expensive. But any little bit helps. The faster you can see in a target and then hide your probes, the better. The next question is, why do people recommend using less than a full group of probes? It's probably old information. Use 8 probes. So, what's the best distance to go to for if I'm warping to a target I've scanned down? Assuming I'm cloaked. And assuming I'm not cloaked. So, if you're cloaked, I would say you warp in, and you warp from 30 or 20 to 50. It all depends on where they are. If they're like in a mission pocket, it's better to warp out a little bit farther. If they're at a gate, it's just all about knowing where they are and just learning off of mistakes. If you're uncloaked, it all depends on what ship you're in. If you're in a ship that needs to be at 0, warp to 0. For the most part, you want to warp to 0 even if you're in the Inti. Maybe 10's a little bit safer. And his last question is there a faster way of moving probes around to get them on the target? Or do I just have to drag them around and try to judge where they are on top of it? So, you descan first. It takes a lot of practice to get perfect probe scans the first time. But you have to descan, figure out where they are in relation to celestials, and the combat probing class. Please, give me more questions, guys. Cardo asks, is it ever appropriate to suggest a possible attack strategy as a scout? Yes. The FC trusts you, definitely, more so. If you see an important target, like you see a known FC, always give that information. It'll help them either deal with the war. I think, for the most part, in this coming war, we don't care if we headshot. I think we're defending stuff and it's a war. I think we don't care if we headshot them at all. It's all about if the FC trusts you and how quickly and how well you can relay information. Nadir asks, if scouting in a Cove-Ops and null, what should you do if, after jumping into a system, there is a gate camp in a warp bubble? Don't panic. Relay your information. You got 60 seconds to relay it, and then either try to get safe, cloak up, depending on how many they are. You can maybe try to go off in a certain direction, cloak up, and then change directions to try and get out of the bubble. Or you could try to burn back to the gate while cloaking up. It's all about what you feel more comfortable with, but make sure you relay your information first. Yes, and you can always pulse your MWD, hit it, and you cloak instantly, and you have a little bit of MWD time, so you move faster. What is the best way? Okay, Cardo asks, what is the best way to try scouting for the first time? Would you advise offering to scout for the upcoming war, for example, or is it better to try something less critical to practice with? It's whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do. We are a learning corporation, so we won't turn down people who want to scout. You can never have enough scouts. This war is going to be a bit different because REB won't run away from a fight. And you can provide good intel by just either being in a system. I mean, like what I'm saying is, don't be scared. Just try and scouting during the war. You might lose your ship, but that's a risk you always take when you're undocking. Odds are there'll probably be a lot of other scouts, but it's always good to practice. Any other questions? Please feel free to ask any questions generally related to anything I've talked about in this lecture so far. A little bit of information. If you haven't done it already, set up as many tacticals, any bookmarks, any instant docs you can in Alderaan and the surrounding systems. The back pocket's quite helpful too. You don't need as many back there, but you want a lot of bookmarks around, say, the POS, a couple around each gate, at least an instant undock from each station. If I remember correctly, the Alderaan POS is an instant undock from PTS. Any other questions? Any at all? Yeah, like Flo said, there is always a need for good scouts, or scouts in general. But you get better when you practice. No, Alf has any plans for scouting practical? None for me at this moment. I could figure out, did they put the pause back in the same place, and can you relay to get into fleet as a scout? So, I think the pause is in the same location. I wasn't there for the previous one. Um, a lot of times in high value or big fleets, FCs will ask directly for scouts. They'll also probably ask you to comp with them directly. It's generally not a good idea to broadcast who your scouts are if you have a very large fleet, especially if they're covert scouts. Seems like you have to know quite a bit overall to be effective. It just comes from learning the game. The the best thing you can do is know most of the ships, like what each ship is. I mean, I know the Reaper sounds scary, but it's a noob ship. Just knowing ship types is quite important. Oh, and here's a link I was given and I forgot to give out. That could be quite helpful. Another thing is when you descan something, you can double click on the descan to get the show info of the ship. And it'll tell you exactly what the ship is from there. Any other questions? Last call. Any new questions? So Cardo asks, how quickly would an experienced scout be able to scan down a ship and provide a warp in? What should I be aiming for in terms of getting my time down? It all depends. Some ships are quite hard to scan down. Say you're trying to probe down a carrier, you can get it scanned. It's like a probe scan instantly, but you still have to descan it down. I'm no expert on it. It could take from anywhere from 10 seconds if you're really quick to a minute. The key time is probe time in space. You don't want your scan probes in space longer, or in space invisible longer than necessary. Stitch asks, if I don't have time to set up locations to alter, is there any place I can get my hands on some? You'll be hard pressed to get anyone to actually hand out their own bookmarks just because people like their own bookmarks and it's just unsafe to have someone else giving it to them. You might be able to ask around, but otherwise it's best to just make up a couple of your own. Any last ones? So it looks like people are out of questions. So I'm going to kind of end the class here. Please post comments, suggestions. If I missed something and you remember it later, please put feedback in there. Thank you all for coming. I hope that you don't die as much as you would have without the class.